Studium to Studio with your local lay Dominicans. We'll be discussing some of the gems we discovered in our studium, where we share the fruits of our contemplation and the joy of the gospel message. Representing our St. Albert the Great lay Dominican chapter and co-host of today's show are myself, Cheryl Drozda.
Jeff Drozda.
And we have a special guest in the studio,
Fr Pius Pietryzk. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for coming and joining us, because we actually found out about you coming because we were part of the Equestrian Order Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, and we had an invitation to come to the Red Mass, and you are going to be speaking there. So we, as Dominicans, we jumped all over that and had our advocate, Father Guillory, who's our spiritual religious assistant, kind of help lobby for us to have time with you. So thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be. I've been to Louisiana a number of times, New Orleans, and driven through the northern part, but never down to Lafayette. So it's a great pleasure to be down here. I had some crawfish already, so I'm happy.
All right. We'll hopefully get some more of that.
Oh, you'll get some more. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Well, Father, thank you so much. Once again for joining us. Tell us a little bit about your background, and I know, as a lawyer by profession, but in terms of your vocation and how you ended up being a Dominican, what's the story with that?
So a little bit of a long story. I'll try to keep it short. So I was born in Detroit, grew up in Phoenix. Then after college at the University of Arizona, went to law school. So 3 years at the University of Chicago, and then practiced for about 3 years for a very large international law firm outside in Chicago. Loved it. Wonderful lawyers. I was doing wonderful work, really enjoyed it. But at some point had an opportunity to really, as I say, for the first time, pray about my vocation. And I had thought about being a priest when I was younger, and that really began to come to the fore, really actually a bit during law school, but then much more even when I started practicing. And so made the decision to leave to join a religious community. My vocation has always really been to religious life as well as priesthood, but religious life being more primary than a diocesan priest. Was in a small religious community in Chicago for a very brief time, did a kind of a partial novitiate with them, but then eventually decided to enter the Dominicans of St. Joseph's province, of the Eastern province. So loved the practice of law. People always say, "Oh, you didn't like law; it didn't work out." No, I really loved it. I really did great things with it and really enjoyed the people. I didn't leave the law because I didn't want to do the law. I left the law because God wanted me to do something else.
And now you're doing a different sort of law.
Yes. So with a legal background, so I went through the normal training for a priest and was a parish priest or parochial vicar in our parish in rural Ohio for a couple of years, when I was asked to go on for further studies into canon law. So I have both laws, as they say, both civil law with my JD and canon law with my JCD. So I have a doctorate in canon law from our university in Rome.
So you received a presidential appointment to serve on the Legal Services Corporation. What is that? What do y'all do?
So a Legal Services Corporation, or LSC, and I'll probably throw out the acronym a lot because it's less of a mouthful, but LSC was originally part of kind of the Great Society and some of the federal programs under the Johnson administration. But it was so well liked and approved that they decided to make it its own thing. So the 1970s, the Legal Services Corporation Act was passed in Congress and signed into law by Richard Nixon. And it was one of his final acts. He resigned less than a month later. We didn't have anything to do with it, but it's just a proximity there. So we've been around for about 50 years now. And the idea of Legal Services Corporation is to provide civil legal services to the poor. We're not criminal defense lawyers or anything like that. And we're not really a federal agency. It's a 501c3 nonprofit corporation based in D.C., but the board of directors is always appointed by the president with confirmation from the Senate. So there's supposed to be 11. We're at 10 right now. We've been at 10 for a while, but 11-member board, the only 6 of which may be the same party as the president. But we're 5 and 5 right now. And the way it works is we are given a large appropriation from the federal government, not large enough, but large. And then we disperse that according to sort of very clear formulas based on poverty population to grantees who agree to serve the poor under lots of conditions, but serve the poor in civil legal services in a geographic region. So I think there are a couple here in Louisiana, for example, who would receive the funds, again, based on the size of the poverty population.
So based on your experience and serving on the LSC, so you of course were asked to come and be the homilist for the Red Mass here at the Cathedral in Lafayette. What is the Red Mass, and tell us a little bit about the history of the Red Mass.
Well, it's an ancient custom. It actually goes back to English law, back when English was Catholic. And so the Red Mass was the Mass usually red for the color of the Mass of the Holy Spirit, but Red Mass was the opening of the sort of the legal year, as it were. So you would get the courts together, the judges and things, and then Mass would be said as a way to kind of prepare for the year. That became popular again in the United States as well, and so the big Red Mass is the Red Mass in Washington, D.C. The Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United States opens on the first Monday of October, as many people know, and so right around that time, usually the Sunday before, is the Red Mass in D.C.
Is that St. Matthew's?
It's at the Cathedral, so it's normally at St. Matthew's Cathedral. Usually the Mass is said by the Cardinal Archbishop, and sometimes he has different people come in and preach. So that's usually the big rest, and lots of other states. I've done the Red Mass in San Francisco 1 year. In many places like this one, because Lafayette is not the capital of Louisiana, so you don't have the Supreme Court that's here. But often it just becomes then a Mass for the legal community in a particular area. So this becomes a way for, and there are always still local judges and things here as well. So for that legal community, the Catholics who serve the legal community in a given area, that's what the Red Mass is for. Most places it's around the Supreme Court's time in October. I'm not sure why it's in January. I forgot to ask why it's in January in Lafayette, which is fine because I tell you, I live in New York City, so I'm asked to come to Louisiana where it's 70 degrees and not in New York. Yes, I'll come.
All right.
So how do you live in community then where
Yeah.
you are?
So we have our priory, our headquarters of our province of Dominicans is in New York City. So we have a mix of those of us who work in provincial administration, which is what I do. We also have a parish there. We've been at the parish since the 1860s, St. Vincent Fair in New York. So we have a parochial community and a few retired folks there. So we're a community of about 14 friars.
Okay.
At St. Vincent Fair in New York, at our priory there.
St. Vincent Fair. We did an episode on him. He's amazing.
He's amazing, and the church is amazing. It's the finest example of neo-Gothic architecture in the United States, I would say.
Really?
By a man named Bertram Goodhue, which was just a brilliant architect in New York in the early part of the 20th century, and built a masterpiece of a church.
So I'm making notes because I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks. I get
Okay.
to only for a short period of time, and I probably won't.
65th and Lex.
Okay.
St. Vincent Fair. Come and see. It's a beautiful place.
I've never been to New York, but I'm going for the pro-life march, and we're stopping in New York on the way
great.
back for, I guess, Hamilton. We're going to be watching.
Oh, I was about to say, from Washington, D.C. to here, New York is out of the way.
Okay. Yes.
The wrong direction.
Yeah. We're making a little sidestep.
And so New York is a great place to visit. It really is.
I'm excited.
Good.
Well, great. So, we have a wonderful bishop here, Bishop Desatel, and he just had a birthday this month. So, once again, happy birthday to the bishop. And of course, according to Canon 401, the bishop is required to submit a resignation once he reaches the age of 75. And so.
He just turned 74.
He just turned 74. Yeah, we are not trying to push him out at all. But we were talking about, do we really know? Of course, I don't know the inner workings, and maybe our listeners don't either. How is the bishop selected? What's the process? Are there committees? Is there a secret list of names? How does this work?
Yes, the answer to both of those is yes. Normally, the diocese keeps what's called a terna, that is a list of names of people who might be good candidates for it, and that's usually shared with the nuncio. So we have a nuncio in Washington, and he really sort of coordinates that, and then that information is really then there's background information that's collected and received, and that's transmitted to the dicastery for bishops, of which the current pope was the prefect for before he was pope. So it's really the dicastery of bishops then makes a recommendation to the Supreme Pontiff, who can accept it or not, based on the information that he has. and he's required, so the current bishop would be required next year to submit his resignation. They don't always accept it right away. There was the bishop in Rochester we just a new bishop in Rochester. The previous one is 79, so they waited a few years from him. Although with Cardinal Dolan in New York, although I think he was really kind of getting a little tired, but Cardinal Dolan was shortly after he turned 75.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so it just depends on the bishop himself, whether he's still healthy enough and willing enough to continue, whether they're no contrary. Sometimes the joke is that the letters pass each other across the Atlantic, the resignation and the new appointment. Sometimes they're eager to move somebody on. I don't think that's the case at all
No,
with this
not
bishop.
here. We
So,
have a wonderful bishop.
yeah, and there'll be conversations with him about how long, and they'll sort of ask him about his opinion about his predecessor, as well as the metropolitan down in New Orleans, to make the decision of who will be the next bishop here.
Yeah, I think for the next bishop, probably one of the many requirements is you're probably going to have to speak French and be fluent in
Oh,
French,
really?
because we have
Still
yes,
a lot of big. I didn't realize.
very much so. We have several masses throughout the year that are French only, and of course we have a lot of other activities. The procession, of course, that we have on the Fête du
Fête du-
Teche, and where the Blessed Sacrament comes down the bayou.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It,
Yeah, that's great.
I've heard of it. It sounds wonderful.
It is. It is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion on that.
I mean, I think at least early indications from Pope Leo is that he does like Francis a bit, like local people. So try to get somebody from this area who understands the culture and environments a little bit better. It's very helpful.
Yep.
Now, as we're wrapping up the Jubilee year, I'm curious to know.
Have wrapped up by now.
Yeah.
The Jubilee
Have
door is
wrapped up.
closed.
Okay. I'm wondering, did you get to experience any pilgrimages or any part
Well-
of the Jubilee that?
Well, I lived in Rome until June,
Oh,
so
wow.
I was in Rome for a big chunk of it. So did I experience the Jubilee? Yes,
Yes. Oh,
literally
wow.
every day.
Maybe unfortunately too,
No.
with all the people.
It was a lot. Well, it's been that way for a few years in Rome. It's just been very, very packed. So we did have the experience of the Jubilee and a lot of the different groups that came in throughout the year, because there were kind of little Jubilees for a variety of different groups as they would come in, and so you'd kind of experience that and get that.
Oh, that's great. We got to go a couple of times within the last year to Italy, not during Jubilee though. So I
Oh,
missed
okay.
that. We were there when all of the scaffolding was covering.
Oh,
the
that's Rome. Rome's
boundary.
always scaffolding's always covering everything in Rome. No, I was there for the 2000 Jubilee and got to walk the Holy Door back then,
Wow.
a long time ago.
Wow. So, of course, I guess the biggest current event that is taking place in Rome as we speak is we have a gathering of cardinals, and why would the Holy Father, particularly at this time, call for the College of Cardinals to come and to have this special meeting? Obviously, there are, I think, 4 topics of discussion. From your experience, of course, being in Rome and seeing these meetings take place before, what do we expect from that?
Well, the irony, of course, is I don't have much experience about them because Pope Francis did not call very many of them, and that was part of the complaint. So at least a lot of the reports that we've seen is that a lot of the cardinals wanted more collegiality, and therefore they wanted more opportunities for the cardinals to come together. And I think Leo has taken them seriously. I think he was one of the people who was saying this before he was elected pope. So he's carried through on it quite quickly. So I think you expect to see more of these opportunities for the cardinals to come together and to provide, because that's what they exist for. They exist for 2 reasons. One, the primary existence of the cardinals is to elect a new pope. Right? That's their first duty, but they don't do that very often. Their second duty is to advise the Pope on matters relevant to the governing of the Church. And there are 2 conclaves. There's the ordinary conclaves, which happen on kind of a regular basis, and the extraordinary conclaves. Francis only called a very few of those, and I think the cardinals, when they came together for the primary purposes that elect the Pope, complained that they really didn't know each other, therefore didn't know the candidates very well. And I think Pope Leo is determined not to have that repeated during his. And it also understands sort of the understanding of collegiality, that while the Pope is the supreme pontiff and he rules the Church, but he does so with his fellow bishops, and most of the cardinals are bishop, all but a few. And that kind of collegiality, working together collegially with the cardinals that make up the College of Cardinals, is an important way in which he exercises his ministry as the Supreme Pontiff, recognizing that he does this, with a group of people who are providing him counsel and advice and the like.
You're listening to Christ Our King Catholic Radio, radio for Acadiana. We are your Third Order Dominicans, your lay Dominicans here in Lafayette, Louisiana. We are on 90.5 FM, 99.5 FM, and 1230 AM. This is the Studium to Studio, where we share the fruits of our contemplation, and we bring them to you every Thursday at 4 p.m., thanks to Stein Lumber, with locations throughout all of Acadiana. And today we have a very special guest with us.
Fr Pius Pietryzk, great to be here.
And just glad to have you. I would do want to ask a question since you are a canon lawyer and have tremendous experience and also especially, serving with the Archdiocese and Military Services, I think as a judge on the tribunal. What does that entail when you sit on a tribunal? Number one, how are you selected? And number two, what are the type of cases that you see?
So I've been judges in lots of different cases, both. Normally there are two types of cases to be a judge in: penal matters, which I've done several times, and then nullity cases, the marriage nullity cases. So for the Archdiocese and the Military Services, it's just nullity cases. So that is, you have a couple who's been married. Sometimes they were Catholic, sometimes they're not. Usually, if they're not, it's because they now want to marry a Catholic, and they submit to the tribunal. They say, I think my marriage was invalid. Please make a determination. The tribunal gathers the proofs, gets information from the person making the claim, usually the other spouse as well as witnesses and other information, and then based on those facts and the law, makes a determination, which has to be according to moral certitude, that is beyond a reasonable doubt, not quite, but kind of akin, as to whether the marriage was valid. So was invalid. The tribunal never makes a determination that such and such marriage was valid, because you can't really make that determination. You can only make the determination as a tribunal that this was invalid, or there's not enough evidence to determine that this was invalid. So that's one of the two. Either. So what happens is it's usually the way in the Roman courts, the Church's courts, is it's a question that's presented to the tribunal. Is this marriage invalid based on Canon 1095-2? Something like that. And so the tribunal says either yes, it was invalid based on this, or no, it was not invalid, or that there's not sufficient evidence to determine that it was invalid based on this reason. And my experience is, I normally do the judgeship. I don't do a lot of the interaction with the couples, but I have, when I was in parish ministry, done some work with tribunals. And I do think it's an important ministry of the Church. It's sometimes been abused in the past, but I think if the people who take it seriously and understand it, it can provide a way in which couples can deal with some of the trauma that they experienced in their own marriage. It can be a pastoral avenue, I think, really, to help couples look at what sort of happened in the marriage wrong, and then help them to move forward kind of spiritually in their own lives.
Speaking of spiritually, that's one thing I wanted to go back up just a little bit to what drew you to the Dominican order. And obviously you had mentioned earlier that, you were practicing lawyer. Basically, how did you feel that call and what drew you to the order?
Well, it was the dental plan, really. I was looking for no. I came from a somewhat, academic background at the University of Chicago, where I went to law school, which was certainly when I was there, a very strong and very good legal education. And I was looking for that, and I was with another community, small community. They were wonderful. But they were not really academically inclined the same way. So when hearing about the Dominicans and knowing about the Dominicans, and while I was studying with them, actually, they'd sent me to a seminary to do some theological studies, and really for the first time encountered St. Thomas Aquinas, which I hadn't much when I was in college, and was just sort of blown away. I just thought the rigor and the systematization that he provided to theology were not something I'd ever seen before, and found it wonderful and wanted to do a lot more of that, which led me to the Dominicans and eventually coming to the Dominican order. And also, I mean, I was very much attracted to religious life, that is, life in community, the importance of prayer within a community, and the living of the life of the vows was something that I felt called to. But one doesn't just have abstract callings; one has to have concrete ones. Vocations are concrete things. And so I eventually discerned that it was really the Dominicans. And I often say to people, is being a Dominican is I feel at home. And I think that is the strongest confirmation. Religious life, priesthood is not easy. It doesn't mean life is carefree and without any difficulties. But I love being a Dominican. I'm very happy that I became a Dominican, and I really do feel that this was that I discerned my vocation well.
I heard tucked in there, too, that you were in Ohio, in a rural Ohio.
I was.
Since we're both from Ohio, I'm curious to know where that was.
Lovely Zanesville, Ohio.
Ah, okay.
We don't have the parish there anymore, but we were there in the early part of the 19th century. So we came there in like 1920, 21, I think, or 1820 or 21. Because our Dominican province, or the Dominicans in the United States, were really established because we were the first. In Bardstown, Kentucky, around Bardstown, Springfield, Kentucky. But we got a call back in the early part. We've been in province for 10 years or something. From an Irish family, really, up in Ohio, that they desperately needed some Catholics, and so we had sent some Catholics up there. And eventually, our presence in Ohio became quite large. And in fact, there was a time in the 19th century in which all of the parishes in what is now Ohio were Dominican-run. There was a Dominican bishop, Dominican-run parishes, and we had petitioned the Holy See that the bishop of Ohio should always be a Dominican because it was basically Dominican territory.
Okay.
The Holy See somewhat wisely said no. But we had, from the very, very early days, a very strong presence in Ohio.
You still have a very strong presence in Cincinnati. So
we're in Cincinnati. We're not in Zanesville anymore. Columbus and Youngstown.
So in terms of going back to, kind of the spiritual life, obviously as Third Order Dominicans, we are required to pray the Liturgy of the Hours and to, of course, during our studium to take up, readings and continuing studies and education. What would be your top 3 or 4 spiritual books that, that really, you as a Dominican, felt that really touched your heart, and it might relate to others as well?
Well, obviously, the first would be the Code of Canon Law, which people should meditate on. Right? No, there are actually some beautiful. There are some really actually quite beautiful passages, particularly about religious life in the Code. Most of them are quotes from the documents of the Council, Lumen Gentium and the like, which I think are really wonderful. In terms of that, Romano Guardini's The Lord has always been something that I've resonated with very well, which I think is just a beautiful, beautiful book in terms of sort of spiritual writing like that. One book that I always go back to, which is more fictional, but I just find it beautifully written and very deep, is C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces.
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I read it every few years. Yes. It's a retelling of a pagan myth, but it is really a story about one's relationship with God and understanding the relationship with God. And if you can really understand what's going on there, it's wonderful. I mean, he described it as his most mature book. It's one of his later ones. It is his last one. I knew it was very at the end of his career or his life. And it shows. I mean, there's just a maturity of thought here, both his kind of knowledge of Western culture and the founding stories of Western culture. This he sort of draws from in these Greek myths, but infused with a very deep Christian understanding and a very, very robust understanding of Christian theology. I just think it's a sort of wonderful story about a redemption and one's relationship with God and grace and all that sort of thing. So I think it's just a great book.
I want to hear more about that because I've only read it once. Part of a Catholic movement of women called the Well-Read Mom Group and it was one of the books that we read was Until We Have Faces, and I think, boy, it was just before quarantine, which I thought was ironic when everybody lost their faces for a while. But anyway.
Well, the underlying idea here, and it's the sort of the centrality of it, is we always understand. I've done this homily a lot, so now I can't do it anymore. But the idea is that we often see the Christ is coming, and we need Christ because he presents to us the face of God. And with that, I do think we get it backwards. The problem isn't that God doesn't have a face to interface with us; it's that we don't have a face to interface with him. And the need for that face, the need for the humanity of Christ, is essential. And so, the way in which this relationship with it's really Psyche's sister, and her relationship with divinity and her understanding of it, not as the enemy, but something in which is sort of necessary that she needs the help to sort of relate to, is kind of the central part of the book. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful story. It is helpful if you understand the mythology of, because he significantly alters the story of Psyche and Cupid Eros. Because he doesn't like the way the Greeks have told it. So there are some important changes. You have to sort of understand what he's doing in those important changes, and then see kind of the Christian under the spirituality underneath it.
I even enjoyed it before all that. Now I definitely want to go back and
yeah,
dive into
I would.
it more.
You don't have to read some of the old mythologies, but at least get a good summary of the story of Psyche and see what he does differently with it.
Okay, that's great.
So I guess kind of one of the final questions here, as we look at what Pope Leo wants to do, and let's say Pope Leo gives Father Pius a call tomorrow, and he says, Father Pius, what are the most pressing canonical issues that the Church is facing? With your experience and recommendations, where do you see canon lawyers, and where do you see the Church dealing with in the short term and in the long term on certain canonical issues that you think are really important?
I think at a universal level, there is the difficulty with the canonical role of authority within the Church. I think there was great damage done by a Jesuit canonist called by the name of Ghirlanda, who was a favorite of Pope Francis, but I think he had very problematic views about the relationship between authority, that is the power of governance within the Church, and its relationship to holy orders. Historically, there's a strong connection. That is, the power of governance is connected to the power of orders in the Church. I think Ghirlanda made some, I think, specious arguments about the breaking down of that I think are a problem. We are a hierarchical Church. Hierarchy means rule by priests. And there cannot be a separation between the governance of the Church and the exercise of the spiritual power of the Church that is in holy orders. And with some of the talk about synodality, there seem to be attempts to pretend that isn't an essential teaching of the Church, that it is. And I think reckoning with that and making sure that we don't fall into some error regarding that is a real crisis that not too many people are talking about, because they want to pretend that the issue doesn't exist, but I think it is a real problem. In terms of other sort of canonical issues in the Church, one of the things that we've been struggling with is the discipline of the Church. I think particularly in the United States, but also now increasingly in the rest of the world, because of the revelations of child sexual abuse, which are a horrible thing. The question is the canonical capability of dealing with that. You see this also same problem in civil society, is a tendency to want to punish people who do terribly wrong things, but to want to do that by denying them due process and the fundamental protections that legal processes are meant to give. That pressure is in the Church, and it should be resisted. There are elements of the Church's exercise of penal authority that already decrease or narrow due process protections, and we have to be very worrisome that we're not fundamentally violating the rights of individuals and therefore causing greater injustices in our pursuit of a legitimate desire to want to right the injustices of abuse against others. I think that is a major problem that we have to tackle, and it's becoming a worldwide problem and not just an American one. And I think that's not just a canonical issue, too. I think that's also increasingly an issue of civil law, as you saw in the case of Cardinal Pell in Australia.
Well, it's been exciting to have you here with us, Father Pius. We greatly appreciate it.
Remember to stand firm in the absolute truth, Jesus Christ, because only the truth bears grace.
Lived through time, passed through fire, broke my heart, wounded desire, changed my life, fixed the past, stared at